The first thing Silas Hale saw was the steam of a stranger's breath lifting out of the hay beside his mare before dawn. The second was the hand under the sleeper's cheek, split across the knuckles and red from cold, as if winter had been chewing on the girl and failed to finish the work. Bess, his old roan, stood over her without stamping once. That told Silas enough. Nervous horses did not keep still for danger. They kept still for sorrow. He stepped into the stall, and the girl woke in the same instant. A little knife flashed up. No cry, no waste. Just steel and the hard reflex of somebody who had learned young that waking might be the worst part of the day. Easy, Silas said. She was older now than the first winter he had found signs of her in the barn. 17, maybe 18. Her dark hair was hacked short, her coat patched to death, and there was dried blood on one sleeve. Not the first winter. Not the second. 4 or 5 years, when the Wyoming wind came mean across the plain, Silas had found proof of her. A hollow in the hay. A biscuit missing by the harness bench. His late wife Clara's old blue blanket folded wrong because smaller hands had used it. He had never spoken to the shadow in his barn. He had only left food where she could find it and told himself that counted for something. This morning there was blood, and there was a satchel strapped under her coat, like something worth more than breath. Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. There is something good in knowing who is coming out of the dark to sit by the same fire. If I meant to turn you out, Silas said, I'd have done it the first winter. That made her blink. You knew? A man notices when his biscuits learn to walk. The corner of her mouth twitched. Then she swayed. He saw the tremor in her hand, the stiffness in her left arm, the frost melting into the straw around her boots. From beyond the corrals came the clatter of riders. Her whole face changed. They followed me. Who? Pike's men. If they find me, don't tell them I was here. Silas looked toward the slatted door. Enoch Pike. Banker, county commissioner, holder of half the county's debt and most of its fear. The girl tried to stand. Her knees gave. Silas caught her. She was fever-hot and light as kindling. Leave me, she muttered. He did not. Her forehead touched his jaw, and the heat of her flung him straight into another winter, another room, another small body burning under quilts while he stood there useless. His daughter may have been 8. Clara had looked at him over the bed with terror she was trying not to spread. He had never forgiven himself for living in the world that kept going after her. He shut the memory down hard. Put me down. Can't. Why? Because if you stay in this barn, you'll die in it. He carried her through the wind, up the porch, and into the house he had kept closed to everybody but himself, the dust and grief. That was the point of no return. The latch fell behind them like a shot in an empty church. The room took her in hungrily. Cold ash waited in the stove. Clara's china dog still sat above the mantel with one ear chipped. May's checkerboard remained on the shelf where Silas had never moved it. The girl saw all of it in one quick glance and understood what kind of dead lived there. Silas set her on the settee, built a fire, fetched water and yesterday's coffee, then cut back the bloody sleeve. The wound was only a graze, but a deep bruise climbed from wrist to elbow in the shape of fingers. Who did that? She looked at the satchel. The same man who'll do worse if I don't get this to somebody before noon. What is it? A ledger. Her name was Cora Finch. She told him that after the coffee touched her lips. She had no parents living, and the surname belonged to nobody but herself. She had worked 3 years at Pike's Mercy House, which town ladies called a charity and the girls inside called a trap. They washed linens, scrubbed floors, poured coffee for Pike's guests, and if they were clever enough, they kept his books. I kept noticing widows paying twice, Cora said. Ranchers losing land they'd already covered. County money meant for the Mercy House, buying Pike new wallpaper. Silas held out his hand. She gave him the ledger. The names alone were enough. Mrs. Dover. Ben Caskell. Coal shipments never delivered. Relief funds charged to dead men. Then he found his own line with interest added twice over. That's wrong, he said. Most of it is. There it was, plain and ugly. He could ride straight to Pike, hand over the girl and the book, and maybe keep his ranch another season. Or he could stand beside a half-frozen orphan with stolen truth in her lap and risk losing everything still tied to Clara and May. A knock came at the back door. 3 quick taps. One slow. Silas took the rifle before the latch. It was Nora Bellamy with a crock of broth under one arm and snow in the folds of her shawl. Nora had taught at the schoolhouse before Pike squeezed the funds dry. She lived east of Silas with her brother's boys and enough stubbornness for 3 households. Her gaze went from the rifle to Cora to the ledger. "So it's true," she said. "He finally chased the wrong girl too far." Cora stared. "You know me? I know every child who keeps trying to disappear." Nora crossed to the table. "Sit still, both of you." Within minutes, she had broth heating and spectacles low on her nose while she read the ledger. Her thumb stopped on one page. "County disbursements," she whispered. "Coal never delivered. School funds diverted. Widow relief billed twice. Will the sheriff act?" Silas asked. "Tom Bledsoe will act if the law is standing in the street with witnesses enough to shame him," Nora said. "He will not act on a rancher in debt, and a girl Pike has already named a thief." "Then I'll speak anyway," Cora said. "Good," Nora said. "But we'll do more than speak." She drew out her school register and began copying names, dates, and sums in a clean teacher's hand while Cora fed her page numbers from memory. Silas watched the two of them bent over the table and felt something harder than hope enter the room. Purpose. When Nora left, she carried the register under her cloak and orders from Silas to stop at every house named in Pike's pages where honesty still outlived fear. At the door, she looked back at him. "You know what this costs if he means business." Silas glanced at Cora, dozing by the fire with her fingers on the ledger. "Yes." Nora nodded once. "About time." Pike came by late afternoon. He stepped onto the porch in a black coat too fine for honest weather, flanked by Lusk Danner and another man with a shotgun across his knees. Pike removed his gloves finger by finger as if cruelty deserved ceremony. "Evening, Hale," he called. "I'm here after stolen property." Silas opened the door only wide enough to stand in it. "No property of yours in this house." Pike's pale eyes slid past him anyway. "The Finch girl took a ledger from my office." Silas said nothing. Pike smiled. "You are already behind on your note. Hand her over, and I may remember mercy. Keep her, and I post seizure by morning. Tomorrow at noon, I take the ranch." Behind Silas, a floorboard gave one small creak. Cora, listening. Pike heard it. "Folks love the sound of charity when it costs them nothing," he said. "I feed those girls. I give them work. And this is my thanks." "A man who has to name his own charity usually hasn't got any," Silas said. Pike's smile flattened. "Noon tomorrow." He turned, then glanced back. "Ask yourself whether one stray girl is worth losing the only graveyard your family has left." He knew where to stick the knife. When the wagon rolled away, Cora stood behind Silas with the ledger to her chest. "You can still send me out before dawn," she said. "I won't think less of you." "That makes one of us," he said. He looked toward the pasture where Clara and May lay beneath the cottonwoods. "When my girl was dying, I thought if I worked hard enough, wanted hard enough, I could bargain with grief. Turns out grief does its own taking. Then it waits to see what kind of man comes after." He met Cora's eyes. "I haven't liked my answer for a long time." That night he cleaned the rifle, loaded the mare cart, banked the fire, and made a plan. If Pike forced the issue, he would ride Cora to the old line shack in the breaks until Nora gathered witnesses. Then at noon they would ride into town with whatever courage they could manage. "Tell me true, if you had been in his place, what would you have done? Kept the girl and risked the only roof and grave still tied to your own people, or handed her back to the kind of power that calls cruelty order and expects the world to nod along?" The storm hit before dawn. Silas woke to Bess screaming in the barn. He was out of bed and into his boots in one motion. Cora was already upright with the little knife in one hand and the ledger in the other. A red pulse flickered across the window. Fire. By the time Silas threw open the door, flames were running up the barn wall. Horses battered the stalls. Smoke rolled low and black. At the edge of the yard, 3 riders sat waiting. "Pike's men, get the tack room latch," Silas shouted. Cora ran. He plunged into the smoke. Heat slapped his face. Bess reared, rope stretched tight. Silas cut her loose and put both hands on her neck. "Easy, girl. Easy." That old skill came back cleaner than speech. Pressure at the jaw. Steady breath. One sharp turn. He swung her toward the door and slapped her free while another horse kicked loose behind her. A shot cracked outside. Wood burst over his head. Cora appeared through the smoke, coughing, the ledger gone. "Lusk took it," she shouted. "I got the copy." She held up Nora's school register under her coat. "Good enough." Silas dragged the last horse clear as a roof beam groaned overhead. They ran bent low through sparks. Another shot. Pain sliced across Silas's upper arm, hot and vicious. Right. They mounted bareback and tore through the south gate into white chaos. The plane vanished. Fence lines became guesses. Snow hit sideways hard enough to flay skin. Behind them came the thud of hooves, and Pike's voice carried thin through the wind. "You can't outlast paper, Hale." Silas drove Bess toward the brakes. That country he knew by feel, if not by sight. The pull of wind, the fall underhoof, the shape of home written into his bones. At the frozen creek, he hauled the mare into the cut where snow would hide their trail. Riders thundered past above them, missing by yards. They reached the line shack half blind and half frozen. Inside it smelled of dust, mice, and old coffee. Silas barred the door with a plank and only then let himself breathe. Blood had slicked his glove. Cora saw it. "Sit down. It's nothing. Men say that right before they fall over." He sat because the room tipped once and told on him. She bound the arm tight with the last clean cloth from her pocket, fingers quick and sure. Outside, hoofbeats passed once, then again. "Will they keep looking?" she asked. "Pike will." She tied the knot with her teeth. "He marked girls for less than losing his accounts. My friend Lena still has the scar." Silas stared at the floorboards because rage was easier to survive when aimed at wood. From below the ridge came Pike's voice in a lull of wind. "Noon, Hale. Bring the girl to town if you want to keep breathing free. Otherwise I take the ranch, the graves, and whatever's left standing." The hoofbeats drifted away. For a while there was only wind, blood, and breath. Then Cora drew a folded scrap of blue cloth from her coat. Silas knew it at once. "Clara's blanket. There's something sewn in the hem," she said. "I found it the second year I came. I never knew whether I had a right to keep it." She picked the stitches loose with her little knife. A yellowed slip of paper fell into her palm. Silas opened it carefully. Clara's handwriting leaned across the page. "If this finds the cold child instead of me, take the blanket and come back whenever winter turns cruel. If it finds my stubborn husband, tell him a shut door keeps out wolves, but it keeps out spring too." Silas read it twice because the first time blurred. Cora kept her eyes on the floor. "Your wife found me by the smokehouse when I was 12, gave me bread, and said no child should learn winter alone. After she passed, I came once thinking I'd only imagined kindness. Then I found the blanket in the barn. Then biscuits. Then socks one year. You never said a word, but," she swallowed. "I kept coming because your barn was the only place in this country that smelled like being expected." Something broke open in him that grief had spent years pretending was stone. He looked at Clara's note, then at the girl who had been coming back to the edge of his life for half a decade, and he understood at last that letting people in was not the same thing as failing to save them. "Cora." She looked up. "I should have opened the door the first winter." Her mouth trembled. "Maybe. But you opened it this one." Silas sat quiet a moment, then asked the question that had been riding his mind since the barn. "Why this winter? Why steal the book now?" Cora drew her knees up and wrapped her arms around them like she had done it 1,000 nights to hold herself together. "Because Pike finally wrote down my brother's name where I could see it." Silas waited. "I had a little brother once," she said. "Jonah. He was 8 when Mercy House took us in. Too small for laundry, too hungry to stay out of sight. Pike sent him with a freight outfit one February and marked him placed out, like he was a chair somebody had moved to another room. But one of the Teamsters came back drunk last month and said the boy froze outside Casper after a wagon axle broke. They buried him by the road and never told anyone." She stared at the wall. "Pike kept counting money for feeding him 2 more seasons after he was dead. I wanted his name somewhere the truth could find it." Silas felt that land in the oldest wound he had. "May was 8 too," he said. Cora turned toward him. "I saw you the first winter," he admitted. "Not in the barn. On the porch. You'd come halfway up the steps and turn back. I stood inside with my hand on the latch and could not make myself open it. Thought if I heard small feet in the house again, it would finish me." He looked down at Clara's note. "So I put out bread and blankets and called that kindness, because it asked less of me." Cora was quiet so long he wondered if he had said too much. Then she answered in a voice gone soft at the edges. "Maybe it was all you had then." He gave a rough little shake of his head. "A man can starve a place by only giving it the part of himself that doesn't hurt." Cora looked toward the white glowing window. "Well," she said, "I'm tired of being fed by cracks. I'd just as soon try for a door. He let out a breath that might have been the start of a laugh or a sob. In that storm-beaten shack, with Pike holding half the county by the throat, it was the closest thing to forgiveness Silas had heard in years. If this story is moving you, you are exactly who it was written for. A like and a subscribe tell us to keep bringing these stories to the people who need them. By first light the snow had slackened. Silas rose and began saddling Bess. Cora stared at him. You're going to town? We are. He'll have men there. He always does. He'll have the sheriff. Silas cinched the strap one-handed. Then we bring him more truth than he can step around. At Nora's place they found exactly what Silas had hardly dared ask for. People. Nora stood on the porch with the school register under one arm and 6 townsfolk behind her. Mrs. Dover in widow's black. Ben Caskill with a tin box of receipts. Mr. Pruitt from the store wiping his hands on his apron out of habit. 2 ranch wives Pike had cheated on Cole. And Sheriff Tom Bledsoe, hat low, face unreadable. I did not come for Pike, the sheriff said. I came because half the county arrived at my office before breakfast calling me a coward. He glanced at Nora, which was not kindly put. We made room for growth, Nora said. Cora nearly smiled. They rode into town near noon, a ragged procession with more honesty than polish. People came out of the mercantile and feed store to stare. Pike stood on the courthouse steps with the foreclosure notice in one hand like he meant to bless himself with it. You are late, he called. No, Silas said as he dismounted. Just not alone. Pike registered that and disliked it. On the landing, Nora opened the school register. Cora stepped beside her. Wind lifted strands of dark hair across her face, but her voice came steady. With your own numbers, she said when Pike mocked the book. Then she began to read. Page by page she named dates, sums, coal allotments never delivered, labor withheld from girls who had earned it, charges billed twice to widows and ranchers already paid through. Nora followed with the copied entries. Mrs. Dover held up receipts. Ben Caskill produced notes proving false interest. Mr. Pruitt finally said out loud that Pike had ordered him to alter flour invoices for county relief. Anger rolled through the crowd before anybody spoke. Pike tried to laugh. A pack of debtors and women scribbling figures they don't understand. Cora took one step closer. Then say I'm wrong about Lena Marsh. Pike's eyes flickered. Say I'm wrong that you marked her arm with a hot iron because 2 towels went missing. Say I'm wrong that Mercy House burned chair legs while you billed the county for coal. Silence spread, quick and terrible. Pike's face went white, then red. You insolent little. He lunged for the register in Nora's hands. Silas moved before the thought was finished. He caught Pike by the collar and slammed him into the courthouse rail. The foreclosure paper flew. Pike swung wild. Silas took one blow to the cheek, pinned his arm, and forced him down to one knee in slush before the whole town. You don't touch her, Silas said, low and hard. You don't touch any of them again. Pike spat blood. You think this ends me? No, Sheriff Bledsoe said, stepping forward at last. Looks to me your own books did that. He clapped irons on Pike in front of everyone the man had spent years making small. Lusk Danner backed toward his horse, saw the crowd, and thought better of it. After that the truth came fast. Women from Mercy House named names. Teamsters talked about freight never unloaded. The county treasurer turned pale over missing vouchers and began talking to save his own neck. By sundown Pike's office was sealed, his accounts seized, and every girl at Mercy House moved under church care until proper homes could be found. Silas did not get his barn back that day. Burned wood does not unburn for justice. But he got his note torn up on the courthouse steps. He got Clara and May's graves left in peace. And he got to watch women old enough to be Cora's grandmother take turns squeezing her hands and thanking her for being braver than people with easier lives. Near sunset, Cora found him by the hitching rail. What happens now? Silas looked toward the ranch road, toward blackened barn posts, toward the house with a door that had finally remembered its work. If you want, he said, there's a room in that house facing east. Needs dusting. Needs curtains. Needs somebody younger than me to tell it isn't dead. Her breath caught. You asking me to stay? I'm asking whether you'd like to come home. For one long second, he thought mistrust might still be too sensible for her to set down. Then she nodded so fast it looked like dignity losing a fight with joy. Yes, she whispered. Then stronger. Yes, I would. Spring came late, but it came. Nora helped choose curtain cloth from Bolt's Pike's hotel never got to use. Church women rebuilt the barn frame in 3 long Saturdays while pretending they only cared about livestock. Cora took the East Room and scrubbed 6 years of grief from its windows without ever pretending grief had not lived there. Silas learned that a second plate on the table did not deepen absence. It answered it. By July, Mercy House was gone for good, its girls placed with families properly examined by women far harder to fool than any county board. Nora reopened the school in 2 rooms above the mercantile, and Cora, who had once learned numbers by stealing glances over a drunk clerk's shoulder, sat there in the evenings helping younger children sound out words. Silas would pass the window after chores and hear her laugh rise above the scrape of slates. It always startled him how quickly a house full of grief can change shape once laughter begins laying claim to the air. In October, they fenced a new pasture line where the barn had burned. Halfway through the work, Cora looked toward the house, where lamplight already glowed and Nora was setting supper on the table after spending more evenings there than not. Funny thing about winter, Cora said. It makes you think surviving is the whole job. Silas leaned on the post driver. And it isn't. She smiled. Turns out living takes a little more nerve. He nodded. Worthier kind, though. Years later, folks still talked about the day Enoch Pike went to his knees in the slush. The people who knew better said the truer miracle had happened earlier, when a stubborn man opened a door he had kept shut against half the world and learned the dead do not ask us to live smaller in their honor. They ask us to carry the warmth forward. Some homes are raised with lumber and nails. The lasting ones begin the first cold night somebody finally says, stay. On the first snowfall of the next winter, Silas came in from the porch to find Cora laughing by the stove while Nora poured coffee, and through the east window the house shone across the white pasture like a lantern nobody in that family would ever have to search for again. And if you stay with us next time, we'll tell the story of the ranch widow everyone called simple until a wounded stranger collapsed at her fence, and she proved she had been reading men more accurately than books her entire life.